On behalf of the Ministry of Faith Baptist Church in Water Valley, Mississippi, thanks for viewing this video presentation. The story by Tooth and Claw, which I'm about to share with you, is by J. Calvin Reed. Reed's short story by Tooth and Claw is one of 30 which he wrote and incorporated into a small book titled Bird Life in Wington. I received this copy of Bird Life in Wington in 1962 as a birthday gift from my great Aunt Mary. For 40 years in the early 1900s, my aunt was a pioneer missionary in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. When I was a child, she gave me several books as birthday gifts, one of which is this copy of Bird Life in Wington. Over the last 48 years, I've used this book in raising my own children, 10 in all. I've used it in teaching and administrating 3 Christian schools and in pastoring 3 churches. The stories in Bird Life in Wington have been enthusiastically received in every venue. Across all these years, one of the most memorable of these stories is the one I'm privileged to share with you right now. Mr. Hawk was one of the smartest of all the birds in Wington. No one could ever dispute that he was particularly smart in business matters. For this reason, some birdarians thought that he ought to be on one of the official boards of the church. But of course, being smart is not the only qualification for being a good church officer. To put it in a nutshell, Mr. Hawk was a crook. He was so clever in his dealings that it was almost impossible to accuse him of actually breaking the law. He lived by stealing from other birds, from those that were smaller or weaker than he. But he was too smart ever to get caught. He made it easy and a good living, and he and his family fared sumptuously every day. Why, it was common knowledge in Wington that chicken was served 3 or 4 times a week at the Hawk table. Never to the minister, however. Oh, Mr. Hawk did not have much use for ministers. Well, early one morning it happened that Mr. Hawk and Mr. Buzzard sat for a little while on a limb of a dead tree and talked with one another. There were some birds who felt that Mr. Buzzard had an overdose of religion. He was very solemn and rarely ever smiled, but at least he didn't rob and cheat other birds as did Mr. Hawk. "How do you make your living?" asked Mr. Hawk once they passed the time of day. "I just wait on the Lord," replied Mr. Buzzard in a slow drawl. It was quite evident that he came from Carolina. "He always provides." "Provides what?" sneered Mr. Hawk. "He provides us eyes to see and claws to grab. See it first, grab it first. That's the way I make my living." "But what would Wington be like if all the birds tried to make a living the same way?" asked Mr. Buzzard. "Now, don't start talking religion to me," replied Mr. Hawk. "I get quite enough of that on Sunday. I don't care for it on the other 6 days of the week." "So I've observed," reported Mr. Buzzard. "It might not be such a bad idea for you to give a little attention on the other 6 days." After that, Mr. Hawk thought it best to change the subject. So he said, "Have you had any breakfast this morning?" "Not yet," answered Mr. Buzzard. "Well, where are you going to get it?" "I'm gonna wait on the Lord," he replied. "He always provides." "Ridiculous," scoffed Mr. Hawk. "You never get any food that way. See Bill Robin sitting yonder on the end of that fence stake? Watch me get my breakfast right now." And with a swoop he was gone, darting swiftly down towards the little robin whose head was turned in the other direction and who had no idea that danger was so near. But just before Mr. Hawk laid his claws upon him, Bill Robin caught a glimpse of Mr. Hawk's shadow, and quick as a flash, he was gone. Too late. when Mr. Hawk saw the sharp stake just below him. Too late he attempted to check his headlong speed. The stake buried itself deep into his breast. For a second he struggled weakly, then became very still. And at that, well, that was the end of Mr. Hawk and the end of my story, except 2 or 3 minutes later, you might have seen Mr. Buzzard slipping off his limb and floating downward as he lifted his breakfast off the stake. This is what he said: "It's best to wait on the Lord. He always provides." Thanks so much for watching this YouTube presentation of the reading of J. Calvin Reed's story, By Tooth and by Claw, just one of 30 short stories in the book Bird Life in Wington. On behalf of the members and friends of Faith Baptist Church in Water Valley, Mississippi, I extend our prayers that God will bless your heart and home with His best in Christ Jesus.